Welcome back to another episode of the Vet Worthwhile podcast. I am James Yost, partner and wealth advisor at Signature FD, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Travis York, owner of 3-1 Advisors. Travis, how are you?
I'm doing great today, James. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. We are back with another episode of the Vet Worthwhile podcast. My name is James Yost, joined as always by my co-host Travis York. Travis, what's the good word, my friend?
James, how's it going? It's a gorgeous day. I mean, I looked out the window this morning. It looked like it was snowing leaves.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So who are we talking to today? What's on our agenda?
Today we got Mr. or I guess I should say Dr. Bill Crank, longtime friend of mine. I think a pretty long time friend of yours, James.
That's right. He's definitely, I would consider him a good friend.
So we are excited. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, good morning. Nice to talk to you guys today. It is today. We actually are getting a little rain here. We need to let the leaves are getting kind of crispy.
Ooh, yeah, it's like a brisk 62 and sunny down here in Atlanta. So next time you come in town, we'll have to go out together.
Okay.
Well, Bill, I'm just excited to have you on. Obviously, you have lived in a lot of different worlds in the veterinary space, gone from a hospital owner now to living in the world of transactions and quite frankly, probably supporting a lot of your colleagues when it gets to a point in time that they're looking to exit or understand the value of their hospital. So, I mean, I guess just from a starting point, I'd love to just kind of hear your story and how you went from a veterinarian to a businessman.
Well, that's a good point. It has become really an enjoyment for me to help veterinarians who decide it's time for them to retire and they really don't have any guidance. And it's nice to be that person that could help them. I started out, grew up on a rural farm in West Virginia, went to veterinary school, practiced mixed practice for 29 years. I was fortunate enough to sell my practice to my associate and retired a couple of years after that sale. But when I was going to veterinary school, Dr. John Brick and I were classmates. And we decided someday down the road, we would partnership and do something together. And about 8 years ago, they invited me to become a partner in Total Practice Solutions Group. And what Total Practice Solutions Group does is in the past, we evaluated practices for associate buy-ins for veterinarians to buy the practices. But over this last 5 or 6 years, it's become more of a evaluating practices and determining the difference in what the owner would get if they sold to a veterinarian versus a corporate buyer. At one time, we did 100% private sales.
Well, so, I mean, if I'm going to just kind of jump in there and ask a question on that, Bill, I mean, it sounds like, you've done small animal medicine, you've gone out on the farm chasing livestock around and also done the business side of things. What's the most fun for you?
When I was practicing, I really enjoyed the mixed practice probably more so than small animal, just because I grew up on a dairy farm and I got pretty good at doing dystocias and large animal surgeries. So I really enjoyed that. The small animal I had to do to make a living, and I got to where toward the end of my career, I was doing probably 90% small animal and 10% large animal. And I enjoyed it too, because it's a little different. On the farm, you're helping them make a living, but in the office, you're taking care of a family member. And so it's a lot different way of looking at things. And I got to where I really appreciated both.
Yeah, that's great. We talk with a lot of our clients and with a lot of our listeners about what's happening in the consolidation market. And a lot of people are in tune with that. But just to set the stage here, like in your words, can you tell us what your experience has been over the past 5 or 6 years in the exit planning arena?
Yes. When we first started selling practices corporate, the multiplier for a bank sale was 4 to 6, and the multiplier for a corporate sale was 6 to 7. So it really wasn't a real big difference if you sold to a corporation or you sold to your partner. Over the last 2 to 3 years, it became more of a bidding war. Instead of having 2 or 3 corporate buyers, there was literally 20 to 30. And you could, every day you could say, well, this company bid, $1 million more than your company. What are you going to do? Do you want the practice, or are you going to just let it go? And it was really crazy the way the multiples went up to, instead of being 6 or 7, to more like 15 to 22. Now, all these consolidators had capital behind them, and the capital investment people figured out after a while that they were overpaying for these practices. So what's happened is those multipliers have gradually decreased. And over the last 12 months, they've gone down, I'd guess, around 30%, to where now most of our cap rates are closer to 10 to 14 for the really good practices, and 8 to 10 for just the 2-doctor practices, the smaller practices. So it's getting down to the point where, an associate or another veterinarian can purchase the practices and be very close to the corporate price. At least I think it's trending that way. So that's what I see as a decrease in multipliers, decrease in multiples, continuing as more and more of these consolidators stop buying, or more of the capital investment groups tell the consolidators they have to do organic growth instead of buying practices. They have to grow them from inside so that they're more profitable, so that they can afford to continue buying.
Very, very interesting stuff going on there, Bill. I mean, a couple of things that, my mind goes to when you say that. One is, I would love to get your thoughts on, I heard you say there's maybe fewer groups out there or fewer offers. So, just kind of give our listeners some perspective on that. And then if you can dovetail on that, is if you are a hospital owner, how do you manage that, right? So if the market is changing, what are you advising your clients to be thinking about, and how are you advising your clients to approach this current market?
I think we still have between 6 and 8 really good groups that are solid. They have the financing, they have the tenacity to continue to buy practices. So what we do is we try to pair the seller with the groups that we think will best fit them. Sometimes, some people want 100% cash, some people want equity in the corporation that's buying them. Some people want to do a joint venture where they actually retain ownership in their own practice. I tell people, if you are wanting to sell within the next 2 or 3 years, don't wait, because even as you grow the practice, these multiples are going down. And I see yesterday as the best day to have sold your practice. I mean, the future, as far as the multiples, I have to believe they're going to decline. But there again, if you're a young person and you're really growing your practice at 20, 30% a year, you should wait. But if your practice is slowing down, you're only doing 5 to 10% growth a year, you're probably better off to go ahead and sell it.
Yeah, that's super interesting, Bill. And that's the kind of conversation that I know you're having out there. I mean, it goes back to what Travis and I talk about all the time. It's like having the right team of people around you who are out in the community and see the activity that's taking place, so that you can kind of make a more informed decision. 8 months ago, 10 months ago, in the time of the 22x multiple, I think there were a lot more folks who were willing to part ways with their practice. But now that multiples have come down, there's fewer buyers out there. It seems like the decision whether or not to sell it's more of a conversation. You got to do more analysis. Whereas perhaps a year ago, it was a simpler path to make that decision. You'd mentioned a couple different structures there. You mentioned cash as a form of payment for the practice. You'd mentioned equity in the buying corporation. You'd mentioned a joint venture. I mean, how has that changed over time? It's like from when you started dealing with corporate transactions to now, like how has that changed? And then what are you seeing from the seller side as being like, what is the most sellers wanting to do at this juncture?
Well, what it used to be was 100% cash. The day of closing, if you got $1 million for your practice, you got $1 million for your practice that day. Mm-hmm. that there's only one or two companies still willing to do that. And that's going to go away, because what the buyers need is a way to hold the seller in the practice for 2 or 3 years post-sale. And the way they do that is with what they call earnouts. And the earnouts can be based on sustainability. In other words, in order to get that money, you have to maintain the current EBITDA or the current amount of revenue in your practice. Sometimes it's based on growth. They'll say you have to grow your practice 10% a year to get these earnouts. And that's very common. I see very, very few cash deals. And a lot of these companies now are demanding that the seller take a portion of their proceeds in their corporate stock, which means they're tied to this company. And what that does is, in the legal documents, if you have their stock, your non-compete is no longer only 10 to 20 miles, it's 10 to 20 miles from every practice they own. So when they tie you into that stock, it also eliminates your ability to start other practices close to their other practices. So that's kind of an interesting thing that it kind of isn't great for sellers. Now, the joint venture is getting more popular because that there again ties the seller to the buyer. They're going to be their partner for 2 or 3 years after the sale. They usually allow the seller to have a put contract where, once they are producing less than 20% of the revenue, they can actually sell their portion to the corporation based on the current EBITDA that day or at that time. And then, like I said, the cash sale is pretty rare.
So what I'm hearing from you, Bill, is it's really important today, if you're a seller, to know your partner, know who you're selling with, have somebody who kind of really knows that landscape, because it's not just a sell and run. You're going to be working together with them, and you're investing in them and they're investing in you.
Exactly. And that's where, I don't want to toot my own horn, but a good broker who has experience in the market and understands, what's best, the best structure that you can possibly get, and can explain that structure, because these things get pretty complicated as far as the legal documents, and, having, guys like you to help them know how to properly invest what they get and try to decrease the tax burden as much as we can. We work on asset allocation, try to sell mostly goodwill so you're paying capital gains tax instead of personal income tax. There's just so many things. It's so involved. Brokers, or at least guys like me who were veterinarians for years, our goal is to help the veterinarians. The only way we sell 20 or 30 practices a year is by the one we sold last year tells his buddy, and these guys helped me out. They were great. That's how we stay busy. So our goal is to, help veterinarians, I guess you want to say retire in style, or and have the least burden they possibly can as far as holding that corporate stock or having to stay on the work for, just a couple of years or 3 years instead of 5 to 6 years. So we try to negotiate the best we can for the veterinarian so that they're happy.
Yeah, love that. In thinking through this, in some of the conversations that we've had over time with our folks out there, like, one of the things I always like to say is, in any transaction, and this is veterinary or otherwise, the party that has the best information is ultimately going to have the advantage. And so as these sellers are approached by buyers, they're usually going to be outmatched, I'd say, from a data perspective. So having somebody like yourself who has experience, who knows the landscape, who's done a tremendous amount of deals, is really a huge advantage as you go. And because a lot of these folks are only going to have one shot at this. And so, it's super important to make it the most meaningful you can with the right people, as we've talked about. One thing we want to touch on, Bill, with you, in your experience, is not only a practice owner, but also someone who's helped so many practices transition. Like, what are some of the things that they could do today to increase the value 2-3 years down the road? Like, what are some of the things? I'm sure you have clients who come to you who want to sell at some point, but maybe the value is not quite there. Like, what are you doing to coach them along to help them make changes that will make a tangible, positive impact on the value of the practice?
Yeah, honestly, probably 50 to 70% of our clients that we sell this year, we actually started doing appraisals for them 3 to 5 years ago. They hired us to look at their business, see where they were, see what changes they can make to make it more profitable, and then kind of advise them along that way. One of the big problems we see is the cost of goods sold for practice is spending too much money on goods. That means that they're providing more of a pharmaceutical sales business than a service business. And the buyers want a service business. They want you to be selling your surgical skills, your brain, not selling heartworm medicine. Of course, you're going to sell some, but that's the big thing is concentrate on services and not on sales. Hire great employees. If you can go on one of these calls with a buyer and say that your employees have all been there, or 90% of them have been there for 5 to 10 years, that stability sells.
Well, and I guess I'm going to jump in there real quick, but just kind of, obviously veterinarian shortage is a talk of the landscape, and then transitioning the team over. How are you guiding your sellers in preparing and setting the team up for that transition, and kind of how that process goes?
Well, that's the other point I was going to put out about that. If you have the ability to find a good associate and hire them, do that, because the primary consideration that these buyers have is the number of associates they can keep on to work after the sale. So what we have people do a lot of times is we'll do hiring bonuses, we'll do re-signing bonuses. I'll tell them, if you need, we'll sometimes tie in like a $50,000 bonus over a period of time. It might be, 15,000, 6 months, 15 when they re-sign for year one, and then another 15 or 20 when they re-sign for year two. So I advise them that the best money they can spend is to keep those associates happy, because the difference, a year ago, the difference in that 6 multiple and a 20 multiple might be millions of dollars for this seller. So paying an associate an extra $30,000 a year is just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, it sounds like they need to kind of have a long-term perspective, but it's also just good to know as they look forward after consulting with someone like yourself, like taking a quick look at the practice and saying, hey, let's plan for the future here. Here are a few quick things we can do to make some changes that's going to have real tangible, positive impact down the road. Is what it sounds like you're saying, Bill.
Exactly. Yeah. Just watching your cost of goods sold, looking at your salaries and wages for your lay help. If you're a bigger practice, establishing a really good practice manager to take some of the stress and strain off of you as the owner. Those are things that, really kind of make sense.
Yeah, that's great. So what's one of the, and this could probably be a podcast episode in and of itself, but like, what's a misconception that the community has about either corporate buyers or brokers in general? Like, what are some of the misconceptions out there that you hear?
Years ago, some of the bigger buyers, they would come in and they would change a lot of things. They would, change the name of the practice, maybe eliminate employees. Now the buyers, their primary concern is lack of change. I mean, they all have goals, and they'll set up bonus structures for the people that work there based on growth, because they all want growth. That's They want to grow the practice, make it more profitable, but they do not ever want to eliminate employees. They want to keep the veterinarians, keep the technicians, keep the receptionists, and they want to keep the owner on as long as they can. They want stability. That's the number one thing they look for, is stability. As far as misconceptions about brokers, really, with TPSG, we're not attorneys, we're not CPAs, we're veterinarians who want to help other veterinarians. And, you know, our goal is not to get rich off every sale. Our goal is to, you know, make these veterinarians happy and help them to retire, you know, just not have the worries on their mind of what happens next. Brokers can go through the process and explain to you exactly what's going to happen next. And that's just a great weight off people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think, you know, as we're kind of coming down to the end of our time together, Bill, you know, you've been around the veterinary world for a long time now. What are your thoughts on, you know, where it's going to go, right? 6 years ago, you were doing the 100% private sales. Now you said, you know, over the last year, it's been 75% of what you're working on is going to, you know, groups that own multiple hospitals. What do you see the future of veterinary medicine looking like? What do you see for current associates, for owners, and probably most importantly for pet owners, hospital owners, but then also just for pet owners?
Well, I think veterinarians are great people. I mean, they care about their jobs. They care about people's pets. You know, the industry is not going to go away, and the corporations are going to continue to buy the better practices, the bigger practices, because, you know, whenever you're a veterinarian, you work 30 to 40 years and you get the opportunity to get a pretty good windfall, you're almost silly not to, you know, take advantage of that. But there's a huge opportunity out there for associates and for young veterinarians to buy 1 and 2 doctor practices. And there are lenders out there. You had one on a week or so ago. I mean, they're ready to give money to veterinarians. And I really, really hope in my heart that in the next couple of years, we get more of these veterinarians interested in buying practices, because they can't afford to buy them. And, you know, they almost can't afford not to. If they have these student loans out there, you know, it's been proven multiple times, you make 3 to 4 times as much money as an owner as you do as an associate. So I really hope that as the multiples go down, you know, especially these 1 and 2 doctor practices that the corporations really don't want anyway, we can get more veterinarians interested in buying them, having a future for them. I think it's there. It's just we need buyers out there willing to jump through that hoop and take the shot.
Yeah, that's great. And just to kind of summarize before we wrap here, it sounds like from your perspective, the market has gone through quite a bit of change over the past 5 or 6 years, had a great run up in multiples. And then as interest rates have risen this year and the demand to buy practices has gone down, that multiples have come back down to a more reasonable historical level. Also, just the importance of getting with somebody like yourself or somebody who can coach them along and help them be on their team early on in the process so they understand what's going to happen, how to maximize the value, what steps they need to take to actually consummate a transaction. And then lastly, as we look forward, you see not a threat of hospital ownership necessarily, but more of an opportunity, especially on the smaller practices, for associates to actually get in as an owner, which is an opportunity given where we all believe the macroeconomic demand will be for veterinary spending and pet ownership going forward. Is that a fair kind of summary, Bill?
Yes, I think people are always going to love their pets and they're going to take care of them. And I think that there's a big opportunity out there for these young veterinarians to really consider practice ownership. I think the responsibility is greatly rewarded in the long term.
Love it.
Awesome advice, Bill. I kind of love where that went. And it sounds like, you know, you've been trying to make a difference in the veterinarians' lives. So, you know, we always wrap up the episode with a real simple quote that can hang in the bathroom. It says, "Everyone wants to change the world, but no one wants to change the toilet paper." Mm-hmm. So, you know, and keeping in mind that I think your wife may be in the background. Have you ever snuck out of the bathroom and not changed the toilet paper, Bill?
You know, when I was a busy veterinarian working 80 hours a week, I probably didn't. But now that I'm not, I don't have any excuse, I think she'd probably kick me if I didn't change.
I thought he was going to say something about an outhouse situation at the farm or something. That was not what I was expecting.
That was not what I was expecting. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're on it. I guess, kind of along those lines then, since you answered the tough question, here's the easy one. What is the advice that you would give to a veterinarian who wants to change the world?
Well, I think if these young people, if they will just prioritize their futures and think about where they want to be in 10 years, not think about today, but think about tomorrow. I think that the veterinary profession has a great future. I just would love to see more of these young veterinarians think about, what they could do in the profession, if they came up and owned practices instead of just working, 20, 30 hours a week as an employee.
Awesome. Thinking about the future. Bill, thanks so much for joining us on the Vet Worthwhile podcast. Travis and I are grateful for you and appreciate your friendship. How does somebody find you? If one of our listeners wants to reach out and speak with you, how do they get a hold of you?
You just go to our website, Total Practice Solutions Group website, or you can, most people just call me on my cell. I guess we don't have to give your personal cell out here, but maybe next time if somebody reaches out, we'll shoot them over your way. But thanks again, Bill. It's been great having you on. We really appreciate you, sir, and have a great day. We'll talk soon. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Bill.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Vet Worthwhile podcast. You can find us online at signaturefd.com/signatureveterinary. And then our ask would be, if you found this episode valuable, just think of one friend or colleague that you think would enjoy the content and just please share. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Travis York is the owner of 3-in-1 Vet Advisors and a partner of Signature FD. 3-in-1 Vet Advisors is a veterinary consulting and strategic planning firm of which Signature FD has no involvement or ownership. James Yost is a partner and wealth advisor at Signature FD. Signature FD is an investment advisor registered with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. 3-in-1 Vet Advisors and Signature FD are not affiliated. Mr. York provides all non-investment advisory services through 3-in-1 Vet Advisors. The opinions of the guests and the contents of this podcast are intended to be educational only and should not be relied upon as investment, tax, business, or planning advice. You should consult with a professional advisor prior to taking any course of action that may impact you or your business.